Snow fell heavily, blanketing the narrow road that wound up the Colorado mountains, where Isla Hart was struggling with her old car. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, trembling inside thin gloves, not just from the biting cold, but from the pressure weighing on her chest. The dim headlights cast pale beams on the towering black pines, like silent sentinels watching over the path. The car clock read 6 p.m., but at this altitude, winter seemed to have no end. Isla's breath formed small clouds that dissolved into the icy air of the car cabin. She was exhausted. The drive from Denver had been long, but the real burden was the mountain of medical bills waiting at home, piling up like the snowbanks outside. Her younger brother, Ethan, only 12, was waiting in the hospital for his next dialysis treatment. This temporary interior design job, decorating a remote mansion for Damon Thorne, was her last chance to keep them from falling over the edge. "Just do a good job, Isla," she whispered hoarsely to herself. "Just a few weeks." The road opened up, and the mansion came into view like a fortress straight out of a dark fairy tale. Towering gray stone walls loomed above, and massive windows reflected the glitter of snow beneath a pale moon. Isla parked, stepped out, and her boots sank deep into the snow. The crunch beneath her feet mixed with the distant howl of wind, and a faint scent of pine lingered in the air. Cold seeped through her thin coat, making her pull it tighter as her hands shook while lifting her tool bag. The front door opened before she could even knock. A man stood there, tall and striking, like someone stepped out of a painting. Damon Thorne, 35, CEO of a tech conglomerate Isla only knew through the contract. He wore a pristine black suit, dark brown hair slicked back, revealing sharp cheekbones and cold steel gray eyes. No smile, no greeting. His eyes swept over her as if she were just a package to be inspected before being stored away. "Isla Hart?" His voice was deep and sharp, devoid of warmth. "Yes, Mr. Thorne." Isla tried to smile, but it disappeared under his gaze. "I'm here to begin the interior design work." Damon gave a brief nod and motioned her inside. The interior was vast, almost suffocating. The cold marble floors reflected the crystal chandelier's glow, but there were no paintings, no rugs, no signs of life. Only emptiness, as if the house itself was trying to hide a secret. Isla felt a tightness in her chest, not just from the chill, but from the overwhelming solitude that seeped from every corner. "Follow me," Damon said, leading her down a long hallway. His voice echoed off the stone, devoid of emotion. "I want the house to look decent, but no personal touches, no photos, no personal decorations. Understand?" Isla nodded, though curiosity stirred inside her. Who wanted a house without a soul? She glanced at him, searching for some trace of humanity beneath his icy exterior. But Damon walked on, his shoulders stiff as if carrying an invisible mountain. His suit, though flawless, couldn't hide the weariness in his posture, like a man too used to living in shadows. They stopped in the living room, where a large fireplace sat unlit at the center. Isla set down her bag and pulled out a sketch pad. "I can begin taking measurements and sketching some ideas today, if that's all right with you." "Fine," he replied, but his eyes had already drifted to the window, where the snow was falling harder, as if trying to bury the entire world. "You'll stay in the east guest room. Don't wander." As Damon walked away, his footsteps echoing on the stone, Isla began her work. She measured, scribbled notes, and sketched out simple ideas: beige linen curtains, rustic wooden tables, warm amber lighting to soften the house's icy feel. But her thoughts kept returning to Damon. There was something in his eyes, not just coldness, but buried pain, like a wound that had never healed. She climbed the stairs to check the other rooms, stepping softly on the old wooden steps. At the end of the hallway, one door caught her eye. Unlike the others, smooth and polished, it was old, the paint peeling as if long forgotten. Isla reached for the handle, curiosity tugging at her, when a sharp voice rang out behind her. "Don't!" She spun around. Damon stood there, eyes dark as a stormy sky. "You are not to enter that room, ever, Dot." I'm sorry," Isla stammered, hands still trembling. "I was just checking the rooms." Damon stepped closer, too close, until she could feel his breath. Cold, controlled, tinged with the earthy scent of woodsy cologne. You were hired to decorate, not to be curious. Understood? Isla nodded quickly, heart pounding. Damon turned away, but she heard him mutter into his phone as he entered the room next door, his voice icy. I don't need to be reminded of her. The door slammed shut, leaving Isla alone in the hallway, her breathing unsteady. Her? A relative? A lover? She told herself not to pry, but the question clung to her like the chill of the house. Back in the living room, she tried to refocus. Sitting at the cold wooden table, she sketched an imagined version of the room. Firelight crackling, a soft rug underfoot, a vibrant abstract painting on the wall. She hummed an old melody, one her mother used to sing when she was little, her soft voice filling the stillness. She didn't notice Damon standing at the doorway, cloaked in shadow. He watched her, the steel in his gray eyes softening, just slightly, as her humming reached him. Isla's hand moved gently over the page, and the chandelier's light kissed her brown hair, creating a soft halo. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. Isla looked up and met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. But then Damon turned and disappeared into the hallway, leaving her with a strange sensation, part fear, part fascination. Isla packed up and returned to the east guest room Damon had assigned. It was smaller, still cold, with a simple bed and a window overlooking the pine forest. She sat on the edge of the bed and checked her messages. A text from Ethan. Sis, I'm okay. Don't worry too much. She smiled faintly, though the worry never left. Staring out the window where the snow continued to fall endlessly, she wondered if she could survive this house and the man who never smiled. Elsewhere in the mansion, Damon sat in a dark office, holding an old photo frame, his gaze distant. The image of Isla humming at the table, light touching her face, kept replaying in his mind. He gripped the frame tightly as if trying to hold on to a past he couldn't let go of. But deep inside, something had shifted, a small crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. A flicker of light Isla, unknowingly, had brought in. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now, stay with us. The story is just beginning. In the early morning, Damon Thorne's mansion lay in a hush so complete, it seemed even the sunlight hesitated to enter. Pale rays filtered through the tall windows, casting cold light across stark white walls, filling the space with a loneliness that bordered on suffocating. Isla Hart woke in the east guest room, her breath forming small clouds in the room's icy air. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, trying to shake the feeling of isolation that had clung to her since the night before. Damon's face, those steel gray eyes and a voice sharp as a blade, kept echoing in her mind. She pulled on a thick sweater and checked her phone. A message from her brother Ethan warmed her heart. Sis, I'm doing okay today. Don't forget breakfast. Isla smiled, but the smile quickly faded as her thoughts returned to the looming hospital bills. She stood up, determined to focus on her work. Today she would check more rooms to complete her design sketches, even if Damon's no personal details rule continued to baffle her. How could anyone turn a house into a home without touching its soul? She stepped into the hallway, her boots making soft sounds on the cold marble floor. The scent of aged wood from the furniture lingered in the air, mixing with the dry chill of the house. She noted the dimensions of a spare bedroom, her eyes drifting to the locked door at the end of the corridor. That old peeling door seemed to hold a story Damon didn't want anyone to uncover. Her curiosity, now stronger than the fear she'd felt the night before, stirred again. She told herself she'd only look, just a peek. That wasn't crossing any line. She approached and rested her hand on the icy doorknob. Through a small crack, faint light revealed a corner of the room. Isla squinted, trying to make out more. On a desk, a blurry photograph came into view. A blonde woman with a radiant smile, standing beside Damon on a sunny day. Isla's heart raced. Was this the her Damon had spoken of? Before she could think further, a voice like a blade sliced through the air. You have no right. Startled, Isla spun around. Damon stood only a few steps away, his gray eyes dark as a thundercloud. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms, but it was the tension in his body that made her step back. I, I'm sorry, she stammered, her hands trembling. I was just curious. Curious? Damon's voice dropped dangerously low. You think you can invade my memories just because you're curious? He stepped closer, his breath laced with bitter coffee and the woody scent of cologne. That room is none of your business. Isla swallowed hard, but the warmth inside her, the part of her that had carried her through so many hardships, rose to the surface. I didn't mean to disrespect you, she said, her voice steadier now. But you can't live in a house with no soul. It feels more like a tomb than a home. Her words struck like lightning. Damon froze, pain flashing in his eyes before his expression hardened again. What do you know about loss? He growled, every word a cut. You? A stranger who shows up with a few sketches and thinks she understands me? They stood facing each other in the vast living room, the air between them thick with tension. Isla's chest tightened, her breathing shallow. She wanted to apologize, but Damon's sharpness had stung deeply. I don't understand you, she said, her voice trembling but firm. But I know no house can heal anyone if it's filled only with ghosts. Damon opened his mouth but said nothing. He turned away, fists clenched, and walked toward the stairs. Isla stood there, heart pounding, a mix of regret and frustration twisting inside her. Maybe she had gone too far. But Damon's words, "What do you know about loss?" kept echoing in her mind. She knew. More than anyone. She had lost her mother, her father, and now carried the burden of caring for Ethan alone. But she didn't say that. Instead, she quietly returned to her work. That afternoon, Isla discovered an old piano in the corner of the living room, dusty but intact. She ran her fingers along the keys, feeling the smoothness of the ivory. Without thinking, she sat down and began to play a melancholy tune. Debussy's Clair de Lune, the song her mother used to play when she was little. The piano's soft notes drifted through the empty house, gentle and filled with emotion. Each note felt like a whisper, a story of pain and hope. She didn't know Damon was standing on the staircase, his figure blurred by the dim winter light streaming in through the snow-covered windows. He watched her, his gray eyes no longer cold, but distant, like the music had reached a part of him long buried. Isla, lost in the melody, was unaware of his presence. She played, and tears slid quietly down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the profound sense of loneliness she shared with this house. When the song ended, Isla wiped her tears and stood. She jumped when she noticed Damon on the stairs, his gaze fixed on her longer than usual. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw something soften in his eyes. But then he turned away, his footsteps heavy as he disappeared down the hallway. The house returned to silence, broken only by the wind whispering outside the window. That night, Isla lay in bed in the east guest room, the blanket pulled up to her chin. She thought about Damon's gaze, not cold, but carrying an unspoken question. She feared his harshness, yet something about him drew her in, like a mystery begging to be solved. She whispered to herself, "He's not a bad man, just broken." But the thought did little to calm her racing heart. Elsewhere in the mansion, Damon sat alone in his office, a desk lamp casting a soft glow across his face. In front of him sat an old photo, the blonde woman with the radiant smile. "Claire," he murmured, voice catching. But now the image of Isla at the piano intruded, her brown hair shimmering under the light, her hands gliding across the keys, a single tear on her cheek. Damon gripped the photo frame tighter, torn between the guilt of his past and a strange, unfamiliar stir in his heart. A snowstorm had rolled in, bearing the Colorado mountains under a thick white blanket. From the window of the east guest room, Isla Hart watched the swirling snow obscure the pine forest and the winding road down the mountain. The wind howled fiercely, rattling the glass panes, and anxiety began to rise in her chest. She checked her phone for the third time in 10 minutes, but the screen only read no signal. Her younger brother Ethan was in the hospital in Denver, and the thought of being unable to reach him made her restless with worry. Wrapped in a thick sweater, Isla stepped into the frigid hallway of the mansion. The marble floors were icy beneath her wool socks, and the scent of aged wood floated in the dry, cold air. She meant to find Damon Thorne and ask about the storm, but the vast house was silent as a tomb, only the wind moaning faintly beyond the windows. After their argument the night before, she hesitated to face him, but the storm left her no other choice. She found Damon in the living room, where the large fireplace had finally been lit, casting a warm, flickering glow that defied the harsh cold outside. He stood by the wooden table, pouring red wine into 2 glasses from a dark bottle. The firelight danced across his face, softening the sharp lines of his cheekbones and the steel of his gray eyes. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms, and for the first time, Isla noticed how approachable he looked, though a quiet sadness still clung to him. "Sit," Damon said, his voice low but no longer as cold as before. He pushed a glass toward her. "It'll take the chill off." Isla hesitated, but the warmth of the fire drew her in. She sank into the armchair across from him, her hands curling around the wineglass. The rich aroma of wine filled her nose, mingling with the soft crackling of the firewood. "Thank you," she murmured. "This storm, how long will it last?" Damon shrugged and sat opposite her, his gaze brushing over her before settling on the flames. "Could be a few days. The road down the mountain is blocked. You're stuck here." His tone carried a hint of dry humor, though his eyes didn't smile. Isla swallowed hard, thinking of Ethan. "I need to contact my brother. He's in the hospital. Is there any way to reach him?" Damon looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened. "The satellite phone in the office might work. I'll check it later." He sipped his wine, his fingers idly tracing the rim of the glass. "What's wrong with him?" The question caught Isla off guard. She wasn't used to Damon showing any interest, even if his voice remained distant. "Ethan has kidney failure. He needs regular dialysis." She looked down at her glass, trying to hide the pain in her voice. "He's all I have left." Damon didn't respond, but his eyes lingered on her longer this time, as if weighing something unspoken. Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the wind outside. Then unexpectedly, he spoke, his voice lower, more personal. "When I was a kid, my mother used to light the fireplace during storms. She said fire could drive away fear." He smiled faintly, a quick fleeting smile, but it was enough to surprise Isla. She smiled back, feeling the tension between them finally ease. "My mom loved fire too. She said it was the heart of a home." She took a sip of wine, warmth spreading through her chest. "Did you grow up here?" Damon shook his head. "Number Boston, but I've always liked the mountains. They're quiet." He stared into the fire, eyes distant. Isla sensed a story hidden beneath the silence, but she didn't press. They continued talking, short exchanges that gradually became more natural. The wine gave Isla's cheeks a rosy flush, and the firelight sparkled in her eyes, making her seem vibrant against the gloom of the mansion. Damon, still guarded, began to open up, his voice quieter and warmer, as if the fire were melting some of the ice inside him. Then out of nowhere, he asked, voice low and contemplative, "Have you ever needed someone just to forget the loneliness, even for a moment?" The question cut through the warmth like a cold gust of wind. Isla froze, her wineglass pausing midair. Damon's gaze locked on hers, not with curiosity, but with a yearning to be understood, as though he wasn't asking her, but confessing something of himself. Her heart thudded, breath shallow. "Maybe," she said softly, eyes dropping to her glass. "I think everyone's wanted to escape their pain, at least once." Damon didn't respond right away. He leaned forward to refill her glass, and his fingers brushed against hers. The touch was brief but electric, enough to make Isla flinch slightly. She looked up and met his eyes, deep, intense, burning like the fire between them. Their breath mingled in the space that had suddenly grown impossibly close, and for a heartbeat, Isla thought he might lean in, might kiss her. Her pulse raced with both fear and anticipation, but Damon abruptly stood, breaking the moment. "It's late," he said hoarsely, turning away. "You should get some rest." He walked out of the room, leaving Isla breathless and stunned. She touched her hand where his fingers had grazed hers, the heat still lingering. Firelight danced across her face, but it wasn't enough to chase away the sudden chill inside her. Back in her room, Isla lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Damon's eyes, his voice, the brush of his fingers, none of it would leave her alone. She knew she shouldn't feel this way, shouldn't be drawn to a man so damaged and distant. But there was something inside him she recognized, a sorrow that mirrored her own. She whispered to herself, "It's just the wine, Isla. Don't let it cloud your mind." In his office, Damon sat alone, the untouched wine glass in his hand. He stared out the window where snow continued to fall endlessly. The image of Isla, with her flushed cheeks and firelit eyes, lingered in his thoughts. He tightened his grip on the glass, torn between guilt and longing. "No," he murmured, as if trying to convince himself. But deep inside, he knew the fire Isla had brought into the house had already started to melt the ice around his heart. The snow had stopped falling, but the road down the Colorado mountain remained blocked, forcing Isla Hart to stay at Damon Thorne's mansion for one more night. She stood in the living room, the dim light from the windows casting a glow on the nearly finished design sketches spread across the table. Her job should have been done by noon, and if not for the storm, she would have already left this cold house and the mysterious man inside it. But now she was trapped, not just by the snow, but by something else, a lingering sense of that intimate moment by the fire last night, when Damon's eyes had looked at her like they were trying to speak the words he couldn't say. Isla packed away her tools, trying to focus on the final details. A linen curtain, a warm golden lamp. But her thoughts kept circling back to Damon, his deep voice, the brush of his fingers, and that haunting question about loneliness. She shook her head, reminding herself to keep her distance. He was the client. She was a temporary employee, and these feelings were nothing more than illusions born of wine and firelight. Late at night, the mansion was steeped in silence, broken only by the whistle of wind at the windows and the soft whisper of snow. Isla stood alone in the living room, the fireplace still burning, though the warmth did nothing to soothe the rapid thudding of her heart. Damon's touch, his burning gaze, still haunted her. She tried to convince herself it had just been a fleeting moment, blurred by wine and solitude. But deep down, she knew there was something between them, a silent thread, both dangerous and irresistible. She was about to return to her room when she heard slow footsteps echo from the hallway. Damon appeared in the doorway, tall and shadowed in the dim light. He wore a black shirt, the top buttons undone, exposing part of his firm chest. His gray eyes locked onto hers, no longer guarded, but filled with longing, like a man who had been fighting with himself and lost. "Isla," he said, his voice hoarse, more of a plea than a greeting. Isla swallowed hard, clutching the hem of her sweater. "It's late," she said, echoing his words from the night before, though her voice trembled, betraying her true feelings. "I should go to sleep." Damon stepped closer, slowly, as if afraid to shatter something fragile. "Just one night," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "No strings, no promises, just us, right now." His eyes searched hers for permission, but they also held pain, like he was asking her to save him from himself. Isla felt her heart tighten. She knew this was a mistake. Damon was a man burdened by shadows, and she was breaking under her own. Ethan, the pressure, the loneliness that had gnawed at her for too long. But maybe it was their brokenness that drew them together, made her reach for him in search of comfort, even if it was only fleeting. "Just one night," she whispered, eyes glistening, not with sadness, but because she was allowing herself to fall. Damon didn't wait. He stepped in, lifting her chin gently, his thumb brushing her lips. The touch was fire, searing through her skin, sending sparks across her body. He lowered his head, lips meeting hers, soft at first, testing, then deeper, more urgent. Isla wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, the warmth of his body blending with hers. His woody cologne, mixed with the faint smoke from the fireplace, enveloped her, and she forgot everything beyond this moment. They moved to Damon's bedroom, moonlight filtering through the thin curtains, painting the wooden floor with silver. The room was dim, lit only by the soft light from outside. but enough for Isla to see his eyes deep and dark, as if they could swallow her whole. He undressed her slowly, every movement deliberate, like unveiling something sacred. Isla, he whispered her name, voice thick with emotion, as if she were the only thing left in the world. She pulled him down onto the bed, her hands trailing over his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath warm skin. Their lovemaking wasn't just about desire. It was two souls reaching for each other, searching for healing. Every touch was a silent comfort, every kiss a confession too deep for words. Damon kissed her neck, his lips soft yet demanding, making her shiver. Isla clutched his shoulders, her nails grazing his skin. Not to hurt, but to anchor herself in the moment. They moved together, slow but intense, as if time had stopped. The room filled with breathless whispers, the rustle of silk against skin, the quiet sound of names spoken like prayers. And at the peak of it all, Isla felt a release, not just of her body, but of the burdens she had carried for so long. When it was over, they lay together, breath mingling. Damon pulled her into his arms, his lips pressing gently to her forehead. Isla rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, a rare feeling of safety she hadn't known in years. But as the moonlight faded, fear crept in. What would happen when morning came? By dawn, weak sunlight filtered through the curtains. Isla stirred awake to find Damon standing by the window, his back to her. He had put his shirt back on, though it remained unbuttoned. The coldness in his stance had returned. "Forget last night," he said sharply, without turning to look at her. "It was a mistake." His words cut like a blade. Isla bit her lip, fighting tears. She hadn't expected promises, but the iciness in his voice made her feel discarded. She dressed in silence, every motion slow, trying to preserve a shred of dignity. "I understand," she said, her voice raspy, though her heart was breaking. She left the room without looking back, but the memory of his kiss, his warmth, clung to her like a second skin. Back in her own room, Isla sat on the bed, knees pulled to her chest. The tears finally came, not from regret, but because she had let herself hope, even if just a little. She told herself to be strong, to focus on Ethan, on her work. But Damon's voice, the way he had whispered her name, the look in his eyes in the dark, they wouldn't leave her. In his office, Damon stood by the window, watching the snow melt. In his hand was an old photo of Claire, his wife, but this time he couldn't focus on her. The image of Isla, her tousled brown hair, the spark in her eyes as she'd whispered his name, overwhelmed everything else. He clenched the glass tighter, guilt and longing tearing at him. "It was a mistake," he muttered, trying to convince himself. But deep down he knew it was a lie. He was afraid of feeling again, of losing again. Yet when he imagined Isla walking away, the emptiness that filled him was unbearable. The snow had melted, leaving the Colorado Mountain Road muddy, coated with a thin layer of ice that shimmered under the pale sunlight. Isla Hart sat behind the wheel of her old car, gripping it tightly, her breath fogging the cold cabin air. The engine groaned as she maneuvered through sharp turns, leaving Damon Thorne's mansion behind. She hadn't said goodbye. She hadn't looked back, but tears streamed down her cheeks, hot, unstoppable. "I don't need him," she whispered, voice trembling, as if trying to convince herself. But each word sliced through her heart. The image of Damon standing by the window that morning, his voice cold as he said, "Last night was a mistake," clung to her like frost. She had allowed herself to hope, even just a little, that the night they shared, his gentle touch, the way he whispered her name, had meant something. But he had extinguished that hope, and now she had to return to reality. A life filled with bills and worry, where Ethan, her younger brother, was the only reason she kept going. Before she left, Isla had left the completed design portfolio on the table in the living room, along with a brief email to Damon's company confirming the job's completion. She requested early termination of the contract, wanting no more ties to him or the house. The design fee, part of which had been paid in advance, was enough to cover a portion of Ethan's hospital bills, easing the financial weight, if only for a while. But it couldn't soothe the ache in her chest. Back at the mansion, Damon stood frozen by the living room window, gripping the last glass of wine from the night before. His eyes followed Isla's car until it disappeared behind the pine trees, leaving only a faint trail of smoke. "She'll be fine," he muttered, though his voice was hoarse and far from convincing. His gray eyes betrayed something deeper, an emptiness far more profound than the solitude he'd grown used to. He walked to the table and saw her final sketches, precise lines filled with warmth, offering a vision of what this cold house could have been. Next to it was a printout of her email from his assistant, formally ending the contract. "I've completed everything as requested," she had written. "Please transfer the remaining balance and consider the contract terminated." The tone was brief, impersonal, like she wanted to erase every trace of herself from his life. Damon clenched the paper in his hand, feeling something twist in his chest. He had paid half the design fee up front, an amount he knew would help Isla cover Ethan's medical expenses. But now, watching her walk away without a word, he realized he hadn't just lost her. He'd lost his chance to make things right. He turned away. The vast house felt even emptier now, as if Isla's brief presence had left a hollow he couldn't fill. In Denver, the city buzzed in stark contrast to the mansion's stillness. Honking cars, laughter, and neon lights painted a chaotic backdrop. Isla returned to her small, cramped apartment, where the scent of stale coffee and hospital disinfectant clung to her clothes. It had just one bedroom, where Ethan slept when he wasn't in the hospital, and a tiny kitchen cluttered with unpaid bills. She dropped her bag to the floor, the chill of the wooden floorboards seeping through her socks. She checked her bank account. The final payment from Damon had arrived, enough to cover 2 months of dialysis for Ethan. She exhaled, relieved, but the small joy was quickly eclipsed by thoughts of Damon. She picked up extra shifts at a small diner downtown, where the air smelled of fresh coffee and toasted bread. Wearing an apron, she smiled at customers, though the smile never reached her eyes. The job was hard, but the tips helped keep Ethan's treatment going. One evening, while wiping down a table, she spotted a young couple in the corner, laughing and holding hands. Their joy made her pause, heart aching as her mind drifted to Damon. The way his eyes had looked beneath the moonlight, how he had whispered her name that night. She turned away, biting her lip to stop the tears, reminding herself to forget. But every night, lying in her narrow bed, the memories came back, his warmth, his tenderness, like a sorrowful song stuck on repeat. She tried to be strong, spending as much time as she could with Ethan when he was home. One evening, she sat by his hospital bed, the blue light of the machines casting a faint glow over his pale face. Even in his weakness, Ethan smiled mischievously. "Tell me about that mansion," he rasped. "Was it haunted?" Isla chuckled, brushing his hair back. "No ghosts, just a lot of snow." She told him about the work, the empty walls, the grand fireplace, but her eyes drifted, as if she were somewhere else entirely. She didn't mention Damon. She didn't explain how that design money had helped them. Ethan, holding her hand, asked gently, "Are you okay? You look sad." She nodded and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just tired." But she knew it wasn't true. Damon's presence lingered in her like a shadow she couldn't shake, no matter how hard she tried to bury it beneath her responsibilities. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Damon moved through life like a ghost. He worked remotely, answered endless emails and calls, but his mind was elsewhere. He often passed the living room, pausing where Isla once sketched her designs. He would stop at the old piano, the one she had played that haunting melody on, and rest his hand on the keys, but never played, as if afraid the sound might summon her ghost. At night, he sat in his office, a glass of wine on the table, staring at a photo of Claire, his late wife. But now Isla's image intruded, her flushed cheeks in the firelight, the tear slipping down her face the night they were together. He clenched the glass, torn between guilt and a desire he didn't know how to name. One morning, an email from his company confirmed the final payment to Isla had been sent. The words "contract terminated" hit him like a slammed door. She had once told him he couldn't live in a house without a soul, and now that truth enraged him, not at her, but at himself. He had pushed her away, and now the emptiness in him wasn't just about losing Claire. It was about Isla's absence. For the first time, He realized he didn't want her to disappear from his life, but he didn't know how to bring her back, or if he even deserved the chance. In her small apartment, Isla pulled out one of her old sketches of the mansion, her finger tracing the lines. She imagined the house filled with light, with paintings and laughter, but then she folded it up and shoved it into a drawer. "Forget him," she whispered, but her voice trembled. She stood and prepared for another night shift, the neon lights outside casting a cold glow on her face, still strong, but now full of fractures. What she didn't know was that far away, Damon was staring out his own window, his expression lost, and for the first time, he felt the urgent need to do something before it was too late. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Damon's mansion sat silent in the dark, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock echoing through the vast hallways. The amber glow from a desk lamp cast harsh shadows across his face, sharpening the angles of his jaw and deepening the shadows in his eyes. Before him lay a thin file, dry clinical lines written by a private investigator, detailing a truth Damon hadn't dared to face firsthand. Isla, the woman whose smile had once disarmed him, was now struggling beneath a mountain of hospital bills for her younger brother, Ethan. Damon turned to each page slowly, fingers brushing over the numbers, but his thoughts were far away, drifting back to the look in Isla's eyes as she left the mansion, carrying the hurt he had caused. He picked up a pen, its nib whispering across a blank page, the scent of ink faint in the still air. "Isla," he wrote, his handwriting trembling, "I'm sorry for pushing you away. I didn't know how to face you, didn't know how to say that I—" He stopped, eyes fixed on the unfinished line. Emotion surged within him, cresting like a wave he couldn't allow to break. With a sharp tear, he ripped the letter in half and dropped the crumpled pieces into the trash. Another letter, another truth never sent. Rain pattered steadily on the narrow street outside the hospital. Damon stood beneath a large tree, the black umbrella obscuring his face, though it couldn't hide the tension in his gaze. His eyes were fixed on the third-floor window. Through the foggy pane, he saw Isla sitting beside Ethan's bed, her smile a small, flickering light amid the cold blue glow of the medical equipment. Ethan, pale and frail, responded with the faintest nod. Damon's grip on the umbrella tightened. Rain seeped through his coat, the chill biting at his skin, but he barely noticed. He just wanted to see her, even from afar, just to know she was all right, that she was still strong, still fighting. She smiled, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. He longed to go to her, to say something, anything, to close the distance between them, but he couldn't, not yet. Not when he still didn't have the strength to face the reflection of what he'd become. Turning away, his footsteps heavy against the soaked pavement, he left the hospital and Isla behind, swallowed by the misty rain. The next morning, Isla sat in the hospital waiting room, her phone vibrating softly in her hand. She glanced down and read the message. "A deposit has been made to your account." Her breath caught. The amount was enough to pay off all of Ethan's hospital bills, with some left over. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the hospital. "Who sent it?" she asked, voice tight with emotion. "We don't have that information," the nurse replied. "It was an anonymous transfer." Isla hung up, her eyes fixed blankly on the corridor outside. Her mind raced to Damon, the man with the guarded eyes and silences that frightened and intrigued her. Was it him? And if it was, why in silence? Why disappear instead of speak? She had no proof, just instinct. And that instinct left her heart teetering between confusion and the faintest flicker of hope. That night, Isla sat alone in her tiny apartment, conflicted, torn between reason and longing. Damon had hurt her, yes, but had he also just reached out, quietly, and pulled her back from the edge? Back at the mansion, Damon sat in the dark once more, another letter resting on the desk in front of him. "Isla," he began, "I'm not brave enough to say it out loud, but if you ever think of me, even for a second, I hope you don't remember me as a coward." He stared at the letter, then slowly folded it and placed it in the drawer beside the others. Letters he had written, but never mailed. Words he longed to say, but couldn't. Outside, the rain fell again, a quiet reminder that even though they were so close in heart, a distance still remained. One neither had yet found the courage to cross. Damon's mansion, despite its grandeur, always felt suffocating, like time itself had long since frozen within its walls. His footsteps echoed hollowly through the dark hallway leading to the locked room, each step accompanied by the faint clink of keys in his hand. It had been years, and yet he had never once dared to face this door, the heavy oak door to Claire's room, his late wife. But tonight, something stirred inside him, a whisper from the past, a voice only he could hear. It's time. He slid the key into the lock, the metal scraping with a cold finality. The door creaked open slowly, releasing a rush of stale air and old dust that prickled his nose. The hallway light spilled into the space, illuminating floating dust motes like forgotten memories waiting to be awakened. Damon stepped in, each movement weighed down by the burden of grief. The room was just as she had left it, a faded silk comforter neatly draped over the bed, shelves filled with her favorite novels, and a wedding photo resting on the vanity, Claire's smile still radiant with life. He reached out, fingers brushing over the dusty glass of the frame. "I'm sorry, Claire," he whispered, voice cracking. But he didn't know exactly what he was apologizing for not saving her, for being imprisoned by his grief, or for letting someone else, Isla, slip into the cracks of his guarded world, bringing with her a light he never thought he deserved. The photo seemed to look back at him, not with judgment, but with a quiet, knowing challenge. Why haven't you lived? He dropped to his knees beside the small cedar chest tucked beneath the bed, the place where Claire had stored her most treasured keepsakes. The lock clicked open, revealing a delicately carved wooden box. Inside were fragments of the life they had once shared. A thin silver bracelet he had given her, photographs from distant vacations, and a folded letter, its handwriting still crisp despite the years. Damon unfolded it slowly, heart pounding as he read, "Damon, if you're reading this, I may already be gone. The illness has taken so much from me, but I refuse to let it take your life too. Promise me this, live. Don't just exist. Live with everything you have left." Tears fell, hot and silent, cutting down his face as memories of Claire's final days crashed over him. The sterile hospital corridors, the steady beeping of machines, her unwavering gaze despite her fading strength. Cancer had stolen her body, but not her spirit. She had written this letter in the nights she fought hardest, and now it struck him like a blade, slicing through the armor of pain he had worn for so long. Claire had been preparing him, even in her final moments, for a life beyond her. Damon rose, eyes drawn to the table in the corner, where Isla's design sketches still lay. Her gentle lines and soft tones felt alive, humming with warmth, like echoes of her presence lingering in the room. For a moment, he could almost hear her humming again, feel her hand brushing past his. Isla hadn't just walked into his life. She had reminded him that it wasn't too late to start living. In that instant, Damon knew he couldn't run anymore. Isla wasn't just a temporary figure in his story. She was the reason he needed to keep going, the reason Claire had asked him to live. The next morning, Damon stood before the mirror in the bathroom, the soft morning light falling across his face. The razor glided cleanly over his jaw, revealing smooth skin beneath the scruff he had worn like armor. He looked at himself, not as the hollow-eyed recluse he'd become, but as a man ready to re-enter the world. He dressed simply, a crisp white shirt, black slacks, nothing extravagant, just clean, present, alive. A new determination burned inside him. Find Isla, say everything he had never said, and this time, don't let her walk away. The curtain beside him fluttered gently in the morning breeze, carrying with it the scent of fresh-cut grass from the garden below. He stepped out of the room and walked back to Claire's, this time pushing the door wide open to let the sunlight pour in. A promise hung in the air, not to forget Claire, but to honor her by choosing to live again, and to live for Isla, the woman who had given him the courage to try. The small diner nestled between the busy buildings of a crowded street, its warm yellow light spilling out the windows like a beacon against the cold night. Inside, the sizzle of frying pans mixed with the chatter of customers, and the air was rich with the scent of crispy food and freshly brewed coffee. Isla moved briskly between tables, a tray balanced on her hand, her polite smile concealing the exhaustion behind her eyes. The diner was loud and bustling, but for her it was a place where she could lose herself in motion. If only for a few hours. Forget the hospital bills. Forget the anonymous money. Forget Damon. She carried a tray loaded with burgers and fries toward a table by the window when her gaze drifted, just briefly, toward the far corner of the diner. Her heart stopped. Damon was sitting there, alone, in a dark blue sweater, casual and understated, so different from the sharp-suited man she had known. His eyes, deep and quietly troubled, were fixed on her. Not with arrogance or command, but with something far softer, something she didn't dare name. Isla gripped the tray tighter, steadying her breath as she walked toward his table. "What would you like to order?" she asked, her voice colder than she intended. Damon looked up. The warm lighting softened the lines of his face, as though even the shadows had faded a little. "Just coffee," he said quietly, then added, almost pleading, "and a minute of your time." Isla's cheeks flushed, not from the kitchen heat, but from the way he said it, from the sincerity in his voice. "I'm busy," she said flatly, turning away before his gaze could pull her under. In the back kitchen, her hands trembled as she rinsed dishes. A plate slipped from her grip and clattered loudly into the sink, drowning out the thunder of her racing heart. The diner began to empty as the clock neared 10. Isla wiped down tables, deliberately avoiding the corner, though she could still feel Damon's eyes following her, patient, quiet, unpressing. Finally, with only a few late-night stragglers left, Damon stood and walked slowly to the counter where she was restocking menus. "Isla," he said, voice low but steady, "I don't expect forgiveness tonight, but I'm asking. Just hear me out. One time? That's all." Her hand froze on the edge of the menu. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to ask why he'd come back, why he was stirring up feelings she had fought so hard to bury. But all she managed was a slight shake of her head. "I can't do this again, Damon," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't want to get hurt." She turned away, vanishing into the back room, leaving him standing there alone, his silhouette still and silent beneath the flickering light. When Isla came back out, the corner table was empty. Damon was gone. All that remained was a half-finished cup of coffee and a folded piece of paper tucked beneath a $50 tip. She hesitated, then picked it up, the rough paper scraping softly against her fingers. His handwriting greeted her, simple and heavy. "I'll wait, Isla." She stood there holding the note, her emotions swirling like a storm. The pain of his rejection still burned within her, fresh and raw. But beneath it, deeper down, something else stirred. Something fragile and quietly aching. A longing to believe he meant it, that he had truly changed, that maybe he was finally ready to meet her in the light. The diner was quiet now. Only the faint hiss of the griddle and the scent of oil hung in the air. Isla slipped the note into her coat pocket. Her eyes drifted back to the now empty table, its silence echoing louder than words. She didn't know if she had the strength to face Damon again, but the note, small as it was, had planted something inside her, a seed of hope, tentative, trembling, real. You're watching Soul Stories, exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Rain poured relentlessly, turning the road to the hospital into a curtain of water. The rhythmic pounding of raindrops hitting pavement, mixed with the howl of wind rustling through trees, carrying with it the earthy scent of soaked soil and a biting chill. Damon stood under a narrow awning near the hospital entrance, his black coat soaked through, clinging to him like the weight he carried inside. But he didn't care. He had come with one hope, to see Isla, to say all the words he'd failed to speak at the diner the night before. But then he saw her. Through the glass pane of the brightly lit hospital corridor, his breath caught. Isla was there, smiling, laughing softly, beside a man he didn't recognize. The man's hand rested on her shoulder, his body angled too close, too familiar. Damon's stomach twisted as recognition hit. Mark, her ex-boyfriend. The blood surged in Damon's veins. His fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. His jaw tightened. The storm outside had found its mirror within him. Isla was smiling, the kind of smile he had believed was meant for him alone. Now it bloomed freely, directed at another man. Damon wanted to walk through the door, to demand an explanation, to tear the moment apart. But his legs wouldn't move. He stood frozen, helpless, each passing second carving the image deeper into his mind like a blade to his chest. The rain hadn't let up when Isla stepped out of the hospital, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. She headed toward the small park where she usually caught the bus, head bowed against the downpour, when suddenly a tall figure emerged from the trees blocking her path. Damon! Water streamed down his face, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes, burning with fury and hurt, held her in place. You forgot me that easily, Isla? His voice trembled, almost swallowed by the rain. She froze, staring at him. Rain ran down her cheeks like tears she refused to shed, and then, as if something snapped, she lashed back, her voice sharp and brimming with rage. What gives you the right to ask me that? We're nothing, Damon. You said I was a mistake. You told me to forget you. So what do you want from me now? Her words were like knives, each one cutting deep, but the way her voice cracked, the tremble in her eyes, it revealed the pain she still carried. Damon stepped back, stunned by her honesty, but he didn't look away. A mistake? He repeated, voice breaking. Isla, I'm sorry. That wasn't the truth. It was cowardice. You're not a mistake. You're everything I've been too afraid to admit I needed. He stepped forward and gently grasped her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but enough for her to feel the desperation in his touch. I can't bear the thought of you with someone else. I can't live without you. His confession hit her like a tidal wave, sweeping away every defense she had built. Isla stared at him, seeing not the cold, distant man who had pushed her away, but someone raw, vulnerable, and real. She pulled her hand free, but instead of walking away, she flung herself into his arms. Her fingers clutched at his soaked shirt, and Damon wrapped her tightly against him. His mouth found hers in a kiss that was urgent, aching, full of all the longing they had buried. Rain soaked through their clothes, chilled their skin, but their kiss burned, setting the night alight. Every touch was a promise. Every breath shared was a bridge across pain and silence. They pulled apart slowly, their foreheads still touching, breath mingling in the damp air. Isla stepped back, water cascading down her face as her eyes searched his. I don't know if I can trust you again, she whispered, voice shaking. She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked away, her boots splashing through puddles, her coat heavy with rain and indecision. But before she disappeared, she looked back, just once, and saw Damon still standing there beneath the trees, unmoving, drenched, eyes locked on hers with quiet longing. Her heart twisted painfully, but in the wreckage of hurt and confusion, there it was, a spark of something she couldn't extinguish. Hope. The rain continued to fall, steady and soft, playing its melancholy song as if echoing the rhythms of two hearts still trying to find their way to each other. Damon's mansion, though still cloaked in the cold elegance of stone walls, now bore the subtle imprints of Isla's touch. The paintings she had chosen still hung along the hallway walls, lit gently by sunlight streaming through tall windows, softening the once sterile silence. Her footsteps echoed as she entered, her heart racing, not because of the grandeur of the place, but because of the man waiting at the far end of the living room, eyes tender and full of meaning. Damon wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. There was no trace of the rigid CEO now, only a man stripped bare of pride, ready to show his scars. Isla hadn't wanted to come. When her former company contacted her to finalize a few remaining design elements for the mansion, she had refused immediately. They're not necessary, she told the project manager, firm and unyielding. But after relentless persuasion and the looming weight of Ethan's medical costs, she had reluctantly agreed. And now, standing in front of Damon again, she felt like a bird returned to a place both familiar and treacherous, the very place where her heart had once shattered. I kept them because of you, Damon said, nodding to the artwork on the walls, his voice low and sincere. Isla looked around and realized he hadn't just left her work untouched. He had honored it, tended to it, as if preserving her presence. She wanted to keep her distance, to remain composed, but his eyes, deep, wounded, aching, held her still. They sat by the fireplace, its gentle flames crackling softly, filling the air with the scent of burning wood and a golden glow. Damon sat beside her, gaze fixed on the fire, as though searching for the courage to speak what had long been buried. "I never told you about Claire," he began, his voice barely more than a whisper, each word feeling torn from the depths of his soul. She had cancer. When the doctors told us she didn't have long, I thought it was just a nightmare, that I'd wake up and she'd be fine. But every day I watched her fade. She still smiled, she still held my hand, but I could feel her slipping away right in front of me." He paused, taking a shaky breath, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I did everything I could, found the best doctors, tried every treatment, prayed every night. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. When she died, I felt like I died with her. I shut the world out. I convinced myself I didn't deserve happiness, that I couldn't let anyone in again." His voice cracked. "And then you came along." Isla listened, her heart aching with every word. His pain carved into her, not because she pitied him, but because his honesty was so raw, so human. She turned to face him, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. Gently she placed her hand over his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat beneath the thin fabric. It was as if she were touching something sacred, a heart once shattered, now slowly stitching itself back together. "You do deserve happiness, Damon," she said softly but firmly, her voice like a balm. "You're not just living for Claire. You have to live for yourself. You deserve love. You deserve healing. You deserve a full life." Her words fell over him like warm rain, washing away years of guilt and silence. He looked at her, eyes no longer shadowed but glowing with something fierce and new. Hope. He lifted a hand to her face, wiping away a tear. The touch gentle, reverent. That single moment unraveled the space between them. The mansion fell into silence, save for the whisper of flames in their shared breath. Isla shivered slightly beneath his hand, her breath catching. The air shifted, thick with memory, yearning, and something deeper, connection. Damon leaned in, his lips brushing hers with delicate hesitation, a question waiting to be answered. When Isla responded, winding her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened, wet, urgent, filled with the ache of everything they hadn't said. Their bodies moved with unspoken rhythm. Damon's hand slid along the curve of her back, pulling her closer. She trembled against him, the warmth of his body a stark contrast to the chill that had once lived inside her. The firelight flickered over their skin, casting dancing shadows. His strong frame, her soft curves. Two figures stitched together in flame and flesh. They sank onto the thick rug before the hearth, where the fire's glow bathed them in intimacy. Damon shrugged off his shirt, skin gleaming in amber light, and Isla's eyes traced him, fingers following. She peeled off her sweater, the cool air brushing her skin before his warmth enveloped her again. "Isla," he breathed, voice low and rough with longing. "You're everything I need." What followed was not just passion. It was the merging of two souls long fractured. Each kiss was a silent vow, each touch a promise of healing. Damon's hands roamed gently, reverently, memorizing her like scripture. Isla gasped softly as his lips found her neck, his breath igniting sparks down her spine. She pulled him closer, their lips meeting again, deeper, wetter, salted by tears and sweetened by love. Their bodies moved together in sync, unhurried yet consuming, as if time itself bowed to this moment. Damon held her as if letting go would undo everything, his eyes locked on hers like he was learning how to live again, right there in her arms. Isla clung to him, nails pressing into his back, each moan a declaration, each breath a surrender, the scent of burning wood, the heat of skin against skin. It all blurred into a world where only they existed. And when they reached the edge together, it wasn't a fall, it was a rise, A homecoming, a rebirth. They lay side by side afterward, skin damp, hearts slowly calming. The fire cast a soft sheen over their bodies. Damon ran his fingers through Isla's hair, reverent and slow, as though afraid she might vanish. "You're the reason I want to live," he whispered, voice rough but resolute. Isla smiled through quiet tears, resting her head against his chest. She listened to the steady thump of his heart and knew she had found her home. The fire crackled beside them, wood smoke lingering in the air, a quiet testament to all they had survived. The past still existed, but it no longer ruled them. In each other, they had found something stronger than pain. They had found the courage to begin again. 2 months had passed since that fateful night by the fireplace, when Isla and Damon had come together in the glow of the flames and unspoken promises. Damon's estate still stood tall and proud, but now it carried a different breath, one that felt as if their love had breathed life into its once cold stone walls. Isla stood at the gate, her heart racing after receiving an unexpected invitation from Damon. No explanation, just a simple message. "Come, there's something I want you to see." She hesitated, but curiosity, and something deeper she couldn't resist, drew her back. Damon led her through the familiar hallway, natural light streaming in from the tall windows, casting warmth onto the paintings she had once chosen. They remained untouched, a quiet reminder of her presence in his life. They stopped in front of the room that had once belonged to Claire. The oak door now stood open, no longer locked away. Isla took a deep breath, hesitating, but Damon took her hand, his gaze gentle yet firm. "I want you to see this," he said, his voice low as he pushed the door open. The room had changed. No longer a shrine of grief, it had been transformed into a refined gallery. Bright white walls, sunlight flooding through the windows, and artwork neatly arranged on the walls. Some from Claire, others newly selected by Damon. The faint scent of fresh paint mingled with the warm sunlight, creating a space that felt both reverent and serene. "I cleared it out," Damon said softly, "not to erase Claire, but to let her rest in peace, and so that we can begin." Isla touched a framed photo of Claire, her heart trembling at the transformation. She turned to Damon, her eyes shimmering with emotion and confusion. "Why did you do this, Damon?" she asked, her voice trembling. Damon stepped closer, his eyes deep and tender, as if they could hold her entire world. He dropped to one knee, taking her hand in his, warm but slightly trembling, as if he was laying his entire heart in this moment. "Stay with me, Isla," he said, voice husky. Not grand, not rehearsed, no ring, no flowers, just a simple, earnest plea. "Please, stay. Forever." It wasn't a traditional proposal, but every word was heavy with love, a vow that he would never let her go again. Tears rolled down Isla's cheeks, not from sorrow but from overwhelming joy, as if all her fears had suddenly vanished. She nodded, unable to speak, but the gesture was answer enough. Damon rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms, holding her tightly with the safety she had longed for. Birds chirped outside the window, like a melody of celebration, mingling with the warm sunlight pouring in through the glass. They sat together on the long bench inside the gallery, still holding hands, sunlight draped over them like a soft blanket. Isla bit her lip, hesitation flickering in her eyes, her hand drifting unconsciously to her stomach, where a secret had been quietly tormenting her for weeks. Damon noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, the slight tremble, the way her eyes darted away. "Isla," he said softly, concern lacing his voice. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" Isla took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Damon," she whispered, her voice shaking. I'm pregnant." She lowered her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I found out a few weeks ago, and I was scared. Scared it would complicate everything, that maybe you weren't ready, or that I'd get hurt again. I didn't know how to tell you." Her words poured out like a river, carrying both anxiety and hope. Damon stood frozen for a moment, eyes wide. Then a gentle smile spread across his face. He lifted her chin, guiding her to look into his eyes now filled with unwavering love. "Isla," he said, his voice firm yet emotional, This child is a gift, and you are everything I want. I've spent too much time living in the dark, but now you and this baby are giving me a reason to live again, to love, to dream of a family." He wrapped her in his arms, holding her tightly, as if to protect her and the little life growing inside her. "I want all of it, with you, forever." Tears streamed down Isla's face, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of Damon's embrace, knowing she no longer had to face the future alone. They stood together in the gallery, sunlight pouring through the window, bathing them in a radiant golden glow. The scent of fresh paint, the sound of birdsong, and Damon's embrace felt like a promise for the future. A future they had chosen, no matter the shadows of the past. Damon's estate had transformed, no longer a cold stone fortress, but now filled with warmth and color. The once gray walls were adorned with soft, gentle hues. Wide windows stood open to welcome the morning light, and laughter echoed through halls that had once known only silence. In the living room, Isla sat in front of a temporary easel, her brush strokes bringing the estate to life. Not as a lifeless stone structure, but as a radiant home, just like the life she and Damon were building together. The scent of morning coffee drifted from the mug on the table, mingling with the sparkling light of snowflakes falling outside the window, blanketing the garden in serene beauty. Damon entered, his steps light but carrying a quiet strength. He wrapped his arms around Isla from behind, his warm hands encircling her waist, his body heat radiating through her soft knit sweater. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head, whispering, "You changed everything, Isla. This house, me, and our future." His voice was deep and tender, filled with gratitude as if she were the light that had pulled him out of years of loneliness. Isla smiled, leaning back into his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat of the man who had become her safe harbor. The painting before her felt like a declaration that no matter how painful the past had been, they had found each other, and that was all that mattered. Suddenly, the peaceful quiet was broken by the sound of energetic footsteps. Ethan burst into the room, cheeks flushed from running through the snowy yard, his scarf dusted with melting flakes. "Isla, big bro Damon," he called out, his mischievous grin lighting up the entire room. "When are you two getting married? I want to be the best man, and I gotta look cool, okay?" Isla blushed, trying to hide her shy smile, while Damon let out a hearty laugh, a genuine, unguarded sound, as if all the weight in his heart had lifted. "Don't worry, buddy," Damon said, ruffling Ethan's hair. "You'll be the coolest best man ever. I promise." Ethan's laughter rang out, bright and joyful, warming the room and their hearts. When Ethan dashed back outside to continue playing in the snow, Damon pulled Isla closer, his hand resting gently on her belly, where their child was growing with each passing day. "We're going to be okay," he whispered, his voice full of love and certainty. A vow to protect her and their little family, no matter what came. Isla nodded, her eyes shining as she looked out the window, watching the delicate snowflakes fall and cover the garden in a blanket of pure white. The warmth of Damon's embrace, the echo of Ethan's laughter from the yard, and the shimmer of snow outside all felt like a promise that this home and their hearts would forever be filled with light. They stood together by the window, hand in hand, watching the snow fall. No matter how cold the world outside became, they had each other, and that was the fire that would always keep their home warm.